Specflow tutorial part 13 parallel execution. In part 12 we have learned about binding the external assemblies. In this session we are going to learn about how to execute a test cases parallel in a Specflow. So let me start this session. So when we talk about a parallel execution, so why do we use a parallel execution? It often happens whenever we are going to execute the test cases, we are going to have a different test cases or n number of test cases. If we are going to execute those test cases sequentially, then it is going to take a good amount of time. So that is the reason behind it. We are going to run or execute our test cases parallel. Whenever we are going to execute the test cases parallel, it is going to take a less time as comparison to the sequential. Now when we talk about execution with respect to the Specflow test cases, we are going to use a NUnit test provider. So Specflow does not provide any type of the unit test provider which helps to execute the test cases. We are going to use a NUnit. You can use a XUnit and you can use a MS test as well. So when we talk about the execution of test cases, we are going to use a NUnit provider which helps to execute the test cases parallel. So let me flip to Visual Studio to understand with an example. Right now we have a two project. One is a Specflow session project, another is a Specflow test project. So these two projects we have created in the previous sessions. If you have not watched the previous sessions, then I request you to watch previous session first before proceeding to this particular session. So here we have a Specflow session project, and this Specflow session project is having the step definitions inside this particular web step class. And if we talk about the login.feature file, so this login.feature file is having all the scenarios, and these steps have the corresponding step definitions existed here inside a web step which is provided inside a Specflow session project. Now the question comes up, whenever we are going to execute the test cases, we are using a NUnit test provider to execute the test cases. You need to keep in mind, whenever you are going to execute the test cases parallel, you cannot execute a scenarios parallel with respect to whenever you are using a NUnit test provider. So whenever you are saying you are going to execute the test cases parallel, it means you are saying you are going to execute a two feature files parallel. Whatever the scenarios those are present in that particular feature file, those are going to run it sequential. It means if we are running this particular login.feature file, which is this login.feature file, it is having a two scenarios, then these are not going to run it parallel, these are going to run it sequential. So this is the main functionality of the NUnit test provider. To have it, what we need to do is we need to add a two login feature file. So let's do one thing, let's copy this login.feature file and add it here. So now we have a two feature files. One is a login copy feature file, another is a login feature file. So another important point, whenever you have a two login feature files, you need to provide a different names. So here we can say a login parallel, a build, we must not get any type of the syntax error. Now we can see the build is successful. Whenever you are going to run the test cases parallel, what you need to do is you need to add a assembly info.cs file here inside a Specflow test. So right click on the project, add new items, and here you can search a assembly information file. So this assembly information file, you need to provide the name as assembly info.cs file. So click on add, and now we have this assembly info.cs file is present inside a Specflow test. So when we talk about a parallel execution, we need to add a tag here, which is this assembly. So let's have this parallelizable. So this parallelizable, it is going to take a one argument, which is saying parallel scope dot, it is having a different things which we can mention it. It is saying all children's and fixtures. We are going to run the test cases with the help of the fixtures, and after adding this particular attribute, we are going to add a one more attribute, the level of parallelism. So this level of parallelism, here it is taking a one argument. It is saying how many test cases you want to run at parallel. Here we need to provide an integer value. Suppose if you want to run a 2 feature files parallel, then you need to provide a 2. If you want to run a 10 feature files parallel, then here you need to provide a 10. So right now we have a two feature files which we want to run it parallel. So now we have provided the level of parallelism is equal to 2. So these are the settings you need to do it whenever you are going to run your feature files parallel. So one, you need to add a assembly info.cs file. First, we need to have a parallelizable. We need to mention a parallel scope.fixtures, and if there is a level of parallelism, you also need to mention it. Let's go and invoke the test cases. So whenever you want to invoke it, go to test explorer, and here we have a two feature files, and inside the two feature files, one login with valid credential and another is a login parallel feature. So let's select these and click on run. It is going to start invoking the test cases parallel. You can see we are getting a two browsers are running at one point of time. So it is running a two feature files parallel. In other sense, we can say a two scenarios are getting it parallel. Now we can see it has it now it is running a two threads as well for the second scenarios as well. So it in this way, whenever you want to run your test cases parallel, you need to add a assembly.cs file, and inside the assembly.cs file you need to add a two tags, parallelizable, parallel scope fixtures, and here you need to provide a level of parallelism, how many test cases you want to run it parallel. So that's it in this session.